Phew. Okay, thank you for your patience. And I was joking up front, I don't know if you heard me, but this is what it means to be in the world of security. You are flexible and you respond and you react based upon your circumstances. So looks like we are good to go now. So I appreciate you hanging in there with us. So I'm gonna talk to you about our journey over the course of a 12-month period where we were spun off from Air Products and Chemicals, and we had to stand up our cybersecurity program for the company, which the IT/OT dimension of that was just one of 3 areas that we were focused on. So I will talk to you specifically about what our keys to success were in that journey. Well, I guess I skipped this one. So I'm a little bit about me. I actually had spent 24 years at Air Products in a variety of different roles before Versum became an entity unto itself. As a result of my experience there in a variety of IT roles and also in an internal audit capacity, I was positioned very well for the journey into the security world. And that is when I really became focused and interested in becoming a security professional. And as they say, the rest is history. So I'll talk to you a little bit about what that was like. And I'll tell you a little bit about Versum, which is all about to change as well. So this will be dated information shortly, and I'll tell you why. But as of right now, today, we are about a $1.3 billion company operating in about 14 different countries around the world. Our employee base is around 2,300. That is supplemented by a variety of third-party service providers and outside service providers. It gets us up to about 2,800. We are one of the primary suppliers of the chemicals for the electronics materials that actually feed the semiconductor industry. The reason I made the comments earlier is just last Monday on the 28th of January, it was announced that Versum would be doing a merger of equals with Integris. So that is all still very fresh news. I don't know what it means, but we're about to go on another journey, and we'll figure that out as we go as well. So similar to the work that Dawn and Mandy have done, I'm going to talk to you about what our keys to success were. And I've highlighted 6 up here that I believe were foundational to our success in bringing together IT and OT and standing up a solid program for Versum Materials. Those 6 are building relationships. You've heard that before. Knowing what you've had, knowing what you have, you've heard that before. So a lot of this is not new information. Conducting a risk assessment. Yep, heard that already too. Making informed decisions and being able to prioritize. Making security synonymous with safety. That was a theme that we heard yesterday in some of the other presentations that I sat in on. And then how are we keeping it real? And how are we keeping the teams functioning and working together and striving and thriving to meet a common goal? So with regards to building strong IT and OT partnerships, 3 key takeaways for you. Very important is where your sponsorship is actually coming from. It cannot just come from the CIO. It needs to be a joint sponsorship with both your COO, your Chief Operating Officer, and your CIO completely engaged and supporting you working towards that common goal for the organization, not for IT, not for OT, but for Versum in this particular situation. The other thing that definitely helped us was shared goals and objectives. We had a little bit of an advantage because we had a defined timeline. We had to get out of our transition services agreements with Air Products. If not, we kept paying them money, and that was not a desire for us to continue to do business. So we had a defined timeline to get out, and that's what everybody was working towards. Not just IT, not OT, but all of us. The other thing that we did is we developed a 3-in-the-box structure because none of us could do it by ourselves. We had to have a partner in the IT space, somebody on that OT team as well. And then most importantly, the individuals that were actually at each and every one of our manufacturing facilities on the plant floor that deal with these systems day in and day out. Without them, we would not have been successful. It wasn't something we were doing to them. It was something we were all doing together. And Mandy just mentioned this last one with regards to shared responsibility. Without that, we would not have been successful. We were all in the game together to get to the end. All three of us at every single location. And it wasn't just 3 people, there was always a team of people, but all 3 entities were represented in the journey. The other thing that you've heard a lot about, and I am a true believer in, is all about the people and building your relationships, focusing on trust. One of my favorite quotes is to get into the other person's movie, to be present, to listen, to understand what their position is in the company, what their purpose is in the company, what they're driven to, what results they're actually driven to. And then reciprocate that and educate and make them aware of what your purpose is, what your results driven are targeted for, et cetera. You need to make sure folks understand that you get it, that you understand why they're doing what they do. Not to be the security person that comes in and says, you can't. You want to ask them why. Help me understand. I don't want to be the one who comes in and tells you you can't because that's what I say. I want to be able to understand what you need so we figure out how we work together to meet the business requirements that you have as well. The other thing that was invaluable, and I recognize that not everybody can do this, but one of the things that helped build those relationships was an on-site visit to every facility. We have 14 of them. It's a very manageable number for us. But I have a critical infrastructure security engineer who pretty much toured the world for that year and went to every single facility and met face-to-face with everybody that he needed to interact with. And he was the glue that really kept this all together as we went through this under the leadership, as I spoke of before. Success factor number 2. Part of all the frameworks that you heard is you need to know what you have. We think we know what we have until you get out there and you look into a closet and you're like, oh, what is that? Oh, that runs critical infrastructure. And yes, if that goes down, we're going to have a significant outage from a production perspective. Yeah, that's not good. We need to make sure that that's identified, we recognize it, we document it, et cetera. That was the first step of the process, is making sure we had that detailed physical inventory. Without that, we didn't know what done actually looked like. Every day when we were in the midst of a migration, there was a detailed migration task list of what needed to be done to every single system that we touched. At the end of the day, there was a status update that reported out to anybody who wanted to listen. It was not just to IT, it was not just to the OT folks, it was to plant personnel, any level at senior management who was interested and aware and wanted to understand what was happening at their facility that day. There's a team of IT-like people who are coming in here. They are interested to know what's actually going on. Issue tracking and remediation, I cannot stress this enough. This is one of the things that IT people will notoriously be dinged for, is that you come in, you do your job, you get out, and there were 6 things that weren't finished. You got to go back and fix them. You can't forget about them. That continued follow-up and the attention to detail is what will also help you build your trust and your relationships with your partners, whether they're on the IT side or whether they're on the OT side. The other thing that we did, myself and my colleague on the OT side, is at the end of every migration, we got together as a team and we talked about what we observed at each of those locations. We did a health assessment. Where were there things that needed to be highlighted to management, that things that were of concern to us, and that ultimately factored into the risk assessment that we conducted to help us prioritize, which is actually the third critical success factor. The other thing that I have on the right-hand slide is the side in knowing what you have, but also knowing what you want. Where are you headed? Don't go in there without a plan. You need to understand what's going to be in your toolkit. What do you want every device that you're managing and monitoring inside of that industrial control network to have on it? Is it going to be possible in all cases? No. I'm sure I am not in the minority when I talk about the fact that there are systems in these environments that are old. There's no other way to say it. They run XP, they run some very old operating systems, and in some cases you can't put your standard tools on those. But what are you going to do about it? You need to have a plan for those machines as well. What are your design principles? Establish them and stick to them. If people are going to challenge you and want an exception, make sure you have an exception process that says why and if it's approved. Some of the things, for an example, that we follow in our world is with regards to the segregation of the networks. Dawn said that earlier. Least privileged access. So these are the critical internet security CSFs that Mandy mentioned as well. No unnecessary crosstalk. If those machines don't need to talk to each other, doesn't need to happen. What traffic's allowed in, what traffic is allowed out. No access to the internet from within the industrial control space. That is something that we definitely strive for. It does get challenged, but that is definitely a huge vector where we are exposed. So we try to 100% cut that off. Okay. Conducting the risk assessment, specifically looking at the environment in totality. This is something where we shifted gears a little bit, and actually my engineering partner actually led this exercise in conjunction with myself and with our process safety team. And we looked across all 14 of our facilities. We understood from a systems perspective where the risks were on the industrial control side, as well as the PC that was connected to them. We looked at things like product hazard. I mentioned yesterday that we make some chemicals that are very dangerous. So we need to make sure that those obviously are going to raise to the top of the risk profile, and we need to make sure that those are properly protected. Where are those products being made? Are there specific community regulations or rules that we need to follow? If we would have an incident that production would cease, how much revenue would potentially be lost in those situations? Listen, you're not hearing IT things in that risk assessment. Those are all business things. We got into their movie to understand what was important to them, and they listened. We were able to come back after conducting the risk assessment, did the presentation to our Vice President of Operations, our Chief Operating Officer, and they got it. That was a huge win for us. The other two components, what's the operating system that the machines are running, what hardware are they running, and the control system software itself. What version are we running on? I mentioned a lot of the systems are old. Some of them are not patchable, either because of the operating system of the PC that's connected to them or the Siemens software themselves. So that is an ongoing risk assessment that needs to happen. That is something that we will repeat every year. We're about to go through year 2 and look at how the landscape has changed and if we need to refocus and do anything differently. Enabling informed decision-making and prioritization. The first step to this was actually the risk assessment based upon business dimensions. A straightforward, out of the gate acknowledgement that we cannot do it all. We can't afford to do it all. So where are we going to focus? Where's the highest risk? And where are we going to make our investments? Prioritization is key. I can't go to the business and tell them we need to spend $30 million to upgrade all of this stuff. I will be laughed at and walked out and said, well, that was nice, thank you. But if I go to them with very specifics, this product area is at risk. It's our highest revenue producing product. We need to make sure these are our gaps and this is how we're going to close them. And it's going to cost me X. Informed decisions based upon risk. The other thing that is important, this is all of the stuff that existed. There's new stuff happening. There are new capital projects that are being invested in. Don't put in a new system without making sure your cyber security goals and objectives are being met as part of that. You've missed the boat then. Doesn't matter everything that you've done leading up to that. You want to make sure any new system is on par with what your standards are and what you're putting in place. Making security synonymous with safety. As a manufacturing company, safety is always the highest priority. Our goal is to raise security to that same level of awareness within the company. Our CEO is actually going to be doing a town hall meeting in 2 weeks, and this is one of the messages that he's going to be delivering to the company on my behalf. But it will stress to the organization that it's that important for people to understand what security is, being aware, making the right decisions, and being informed. Everyone goes home not only as safe as they arrived, but as secure as they arrived as well. In the industrial control environment, you are suspect and can be a target for so many different things. Think of phishing attacks, those types of things. We want those people with those elevated privileges to extremely critical infrastructure to be even more aware with tailored education and awareness based upon the roles they have in the organization. The other thing that we've strived for with the COO specifically was making sure that our controls, security and safety work together. We had a lot of discussions around, well, the safety controls will just take care of everything. Okay, are you sure about that? So we had to have a lot of conversations around, what's accidental versus what's intentional. In the cyber world, somebody is usually out there to do intentional harm for whatever reason, whether it's nation state, whether it's insider threat, et cetera, et cetera. The intent is different in the cyber world. So the other thing with regards to embedding security is we actually are making security part of the overall safety program. So when we do our quarterly safety meetings, there is usually a snippet or a few slides regarding whatever the security topic of the month is. We're actually exploring doing incident reports based upon security events or incidents similar to what you would do for a safety incident as well. That's something I'm in discussions about right now. Keeping it real. Well, this is all good. You get through, the journey is, complete. You got everybody migrated over. Are you done? No, absolutely not. If you stop there, you have failed. It needs to continue. So how do you make that happen? The things that we've done, and this is what I am extremely proud of because we've done a great job with keeping the team together. We have bi-weekly meetings where the IT, the OT, and the site personnel, when required, come in and we talk about what's going on, what incidents are occurring, what new activity is going on. We've had several situations where somebody from the IT or I'm sorry, somebody from the OT space is working on a capital project, then they're like, oh, you didn't know about that? No, but guess what? We're now involved. We're involved a lot earlier than we would have been, and we're working together. We touched yesterday, I believe, on the concept, or maybe that was this morning, with regards to management of change. And we do have an active management of change process and tool in place to manage anything that affects or impacts that industrial control environment. We actually refer to that as our cyber MOC process. Very simple guidelines. If you're touching or plugging anything in the industrial control environment, it needs to be evaluated for a cyber MOC and a potential impact. And it goes both ways, whether the plant is plugging in a new piece of equipment or a new switch is being installed in the lab to provide more capability, capacity. Those all need to be evaluated. Doing the annual risk assessment, you can't do it once. It's ongoing and continual. Communication. This speaks to the people part. Keep the lines of communication open. If our team would have gone in there, done the migration, and they never heard from them again, we would not have been successful. Typically, somebody from the team is visiting a site because of an event that has happened, because of a project that has happened, but if there's nothing going on, we make sure that somebody is out to each of those facilities at least once a year to maintain face time and relationships with the organization. The other thing, some of this is a little bit of motherhood in an apple pie, but you need to make sure you are constantly reviewing your access. Who has access to what? Do the right people have access to what? Is it tied to your identity system? Is access being removed in a timely fashion? You don't want people in the environment who should not have access. So that ongoing review on some sort of interval, 30, 60, 90 days, make sure that those reviews are actually being done. The last thing you want to have happen is there's an incident in your environment and the person who caused it left the company 2 months ago. I don't want to have to answer that question. That's my wisdom to share with all of you on our journey.